I love her voice.
Here we are. Here we are. All right.
It's high noon on July 7th. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining Randy and me at Teddy Burriss on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Our special guest, we'll tell you a little bit more about him in a minute. His name is Mr. Sid Davis. Sid is coming to us not quite from the furthest place that we've had a special guest. You're in the Bahamas, right, Sid?
Yes.
This is not Bahamas, Texas, right?
This is Bahamas, like $300 a day just to breathe. Bahamas, yeah.
In the islands. Cool. So, hey, everybody, I'm Teddy Burriss. I work for a company called Burriss Consulting. We're LinkedIn strategists, trainers, and coaches. My goal every day is to help a business professional learn how to use LinkedIn as a business tool. I teach LinkedIn through corporate training programs, one-on-one coaching, webinars. I stand on street corners and is it called proselytize? Is that the right word? And be careful, Sid. I don't know what word I just used, so don't play with that.
No, I put the filters on. I know where I am.
Yeah. So anyway, I love helping people master this tool. And but I also get to hang out with my good friend, Mr. Randy Wooden. And we decided to put together the show to help you guys in ideas and best practices and tactics of job search. Hey, Randy, it's been a few days, man.
It has. And I haven't slept in days. Doesn't it look it?
Yeah.
No, yeah. I'm fine. I actually had a little surgery. And so I thought I'd spare the small children and anybody who might be scared by this face for radio. But no, Randy Wooden with Goodwill Industries, Northwest North Carolina. I run our professional center. And as you might expect, that means if you're a job hunter or, one that might be degreed or maybe in a salaried or leadership role, that kind of a thing, maybe you owned a small company. Those are the kind of folks that our program assists with the resumes, LinkedIn training. This is another example of some of the content that we share, and we try to help and encourage job hunters to reach for whatever it is that gives them fulfillment. And so, again, excited to be back. And Teddy, if I didn't come back today, you may have found a permanent replacement for me. So I felt like I had to drag myself into work today, just to be here to keep my place in line. So thank you for the opportunity. By the way, before I turn it back to Teddy to introduce Sid, let us know where you're watching from. Let us know where you're watching from, and also if you have, and put it in the chat box, because I don't pay attention to the Q&A. It's not in my job description. But if you have questions or comments, please put them in there for Sid, and we'll try to work those into our conversation. I'm excited today because comedy's fun, and when it's delivered well, and Sid, I've watched some of your stuff. You're on top of your game. So we're looking forward to some good, fun, and informative conversation today.
And Randy, our newest attendee in our 25,000 people who are on the show right now, our newest is Kathy from Spencer, North Carolina, and she is the newest person to sign up and join the show. Kathy, please stay for the whole show. Don't leave early.
Exactly.
So our special guest today is Sid Davis. Sid has an interesting story. You 25 years ago, you had an excruciating medical condition. Actually, was that 25 years ago when you were in your 20s?
I was in my early 20s. Yeah. I was like 21.
Yeah.
I remember.
Had a problem with enunciating words.
Yes.
I still had that problem every now and then.
Well, it was the closest thing I can connect it to in remembering, and digressing into, I always wondered how someone had something traumatic happen in their past and block it out. And I realized after about 12 years in the comedy business, I totally blocked that out. It was such a terrible period. And like terrible periods, it's a day-to-day thing. And when you look at it in retrospect, you see encompass the whole thing. But I wanted to be in radio. I had the voice. I was doing play-by-play hockey at Ohio University.
Really?
Yeah.
The Bobcats.
And they were a heck of a team. We were,
We used to go play there in college, Marietta College. We'd play intramural hockey there. We'd go to OU.
At Bird Arena. Oh, and it was a club sport versus a college sport, not an NCAA. So they served beer there, and you had rowdy college students, and they fought, and it was just real hockey.
Look at this. Two practically bald dudes are just connecting in Ohio.
Yeah, Athens, Ohio. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I had, a lot of people are familiar with canker sores, and they're these little, they're the horrible little spots you get in your mouth. And I had some kind of condition that was a mystery to a lot of doctors, where it was a cousin of that or related to that kind of condition. But mine was widespread through my mouth, and I would get it so bad that when it got to the point where I had to do a hockey game, I had the family size tube of Orajel. They didn't have Costco back then. I just went in and raided the Walgreens of every tube of Orajel. And every time my color guy would be commenting, I just lube up my mouth so I could make it through the next several sentences, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I made a decision. I couldn't even eat. You could put a steak that thick in front of me, and as much as I wanted to, I just lost interest in it. It was so painful. I went down to 122 pounds, and like the conversation here, it's not a thing. It's not a very attractive conversation. Everybody, what's the matter with you? You really didn't want to say anything. And then I changed my career path. Then I said, I can't be in a profession where I have to be a talk on call on somebody else's watch. And I got out of that. And fortunately, I found a small community doctor that let me try this stuff just swished in my mouth called Vibromycin. And that knocked it out. And I haven't had a case of it for, 20 years. As far as I'm concerned, it's gone. It's like when I was a kid, I got poison ivy. Now I can swim in it. But by that time, I had changed my career path, and I had gone to an insurance business, into sales. I was in radio sales. And then I just decided about age 30, all of my insurance clients, or several of them, worked for Piedmont Airlines, and they flew everywhere for free. And that enticed me enough that I started all over, went into the airline business, and I started out as a baggage handler, and I went to night school for 2 years in a row. I worked double shifts 2 years in a row. I did day shift and went to night school to become a mechanic. And then I was a mechanic when it turned to US Airways until 2005.
Yeah. Yeah. So introduce yourself to the audience, Sid, in the context of who are you today and what do you do today? Tell us about that, and tell us where you are.
Oh, you mean beyond the Bahamas?
Well, I know you hail from Mooresville, North by God, Carolina, which was that just north of Charlotte?
That's right, north of Charlotte. Used to be a little gas stop town, and now it's like any other city. It's part of this, like a suburb. Yeah. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. I was a Cincinnati Reds fan. And then with the airline, when US Air struggled, and I moved from station to station to station, and I moved to Greensboro. I did some time in Pittsburgh. I did a little bit in LaGuardia. It almost sounds like I have a prison record. I did a stretch in Pittsburgh. I did a stretch.
You were told not to talk about that stuff, Sid.
Hey, Sid, how far from Centerville were you? My grandparents lived in Dayton, and we used to go there every summer. We go to Riverfront and Crosley. Back in the 60s was Crosley Field, and it sounds like you're my long lost twin brother. I'm happy to meet you.
Crosley Field was like Wrigley Field, very similar.
Yeah, we got the outfield. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, Teddy, I think Sid and I will just have this little talk here, and thanks for introducing us. And but I do want to tie in just to kind of set the stage here. We've got a comedian on here, so everybody's in a comedian, or what's the old joke, Sid, about all these comedians out of work or something, or I don't know what that joke is, but.
I don't either. It's not coming to me.
Anyway,
my memory is not what it used to be.
But what our audience is, they're professionals. Many are in a job hunt. Others, if you live long enough, will soon be in a job hunt. So we're going to try to attempt to tie in some humor and its role in the interview and the job hunting process, and also in our interactions with our fellow workers and our family and friends. But also we're going to have a little fun and kind of get some behind the scenes insight on a life as a comedian, because you see the finished product on TV and you go, man, that guy's got it going on. I mean, it just a lot of times it's so smooth, and you're like, wow, how did they do that? And so we've got a person who can kind of shed some light on let's just say it's not as easy as it may look.
Yeah.
And so, thanks for joining us. Yeah.
So Sid, tell us a little bit about, your business today. What is your business all about today?
I started out like a lot of people in the clubs, emceeing, and worked my way up to headlining. And then I got into cruise ships. I'm very interested in corporate comedy. A lot of people take a path when they start because, we have the First Amendment. You can say all the bad words you want, but you can't do that in a corporate environment. It pays much better because there's fewer comics out there that can go out and do an hour of clean stuff. And it's harder to write. It's especially to be funny and connect to.
Sure.
So I started doing American Legion, small shows, fundraisers. And I did it. And this all started when I got booked to do a VFW, I believe it was VFW or American Legion in somewhere up in Wisconsin. And it was like the circus came to town. These folks didn't get into Madison, and a lot of them had never been to a comedy club. And I got up there and just blew the place up. It's like in any seminar you go to, or if a good motivational speaker, if there's a lot of people in there, there's an energy in the room. This was amazing. So I do a lot of American Legions. I do a lot of fundraisings, animal rescue shelters, Susan Komen, St. Jude's, or, sometimes there's just like a little town would want to raise money, like a GoFundMe thing for someone. So I do charity events. I do cruise ships. I now and then I'll do a club, but I'm pretty much out of the clubs.
Now, wait, do little towns really do GoFundMes to be able to get that second street light? I'm trying, Sid. So wait a minute. So you're nearly 50 years old. You're a stand-up comedian. When did you start your stand-up comedy career? For dollars, Sid, not for family.
I was in the airline industry right after 9/11. We knew there was going to be a change. I pretty much knew I was going to be forced to retire.
Yeah.
And I went to a Toastmasters meeting, and they discovered my wit, and I won a couple of the humorous speaking contests.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to the Comedy Zone and did this. Comedy's like Major League Baseball in a lot of ways. There's single A, double A, triple A.
Yeah.
And then those, that make it to the show. Yeah. I don't even know what that is anymore with the internet sensations and all that. But
from what I heard, you must be in the triple A, because there's no way that Joan Collins would have said to someone after interviewing hundreds of people or looking at 100 reels or whatever and going, I want that Sid Davis guy. Is that what I heard happen?
Yeah. Well, it's Joan Rivers. Randy, you know where his mind is, don't you?
Yeah. So good stuff. So, and today you're in the Bahamas. You got a huge gig in the Bahamas. And then, then you head off to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I do. You mentioned Joan Rivers, and then you're good when these A-list comics have you and they pay you well to open for them. Joan Rivers was one. There's a guy named William Lee Martin who's a country flavor comic, and that they want you, if you establish yourself in the business, you to be not only funny but dependable, because in the opening role, know what your role is anytime. I take the 20 minutes between 8 o'clock and when the headliner comes on, because everybody's late and everything, and that's the job. So it's a tough audience. They came to see somebody else, which is a barrier. And once you make that connection that, hey, this guy's pretty funny too, and you want them to forget who's coming on next and have that as a pleasant surprise. And that worked out well with Joan Rivers. Yeah. And what they want is someone that they don't have to worry about, that pays attention to them and follows their rules. And I did that, and I'm proud to say I did that very well.
Well, look at that analogy, Sid. I mean, we got over half the people, over half the 26,000 people on this show today, not including live on Facebook and live on LinkedIn. They're job seekers. So look at what you just said. You want to do it well enough that they don't think about the other guy.
Yes.
You want to present yourself well enough that they're not thinking of that next interview. They're focused on you. It's the same. They're great analogy. So, hey, Sid, great. Here's a question that I want to put to you. So you decided when you were nearly 50 years old to start a career as a comedian.
Yes.
Was everybody behind you and say, yeah, Sid, you the man, go for it?
It was neither. My wife was really not behind me, but she was just like, okay, well. And it's like anything else. You starve for, it's an expensive hobby for several years until you establish yourself. Mm-hmm. And there's that level of, we'll get to talking about job interviewing and the humor involved.
Yeah.
Well, I'm self-deprecating humor, and that's all funny and all that. But if you're in a job interview situation, you also want to appear very confident. Mm-hmm. So if you're putting yourself down, and a lot of my humor is how I bumble through life. I don't want to sit in an interview and tell jokes about how I can't remember phone numbers and. Yeah. I can remember Crosley Field like yesterday, but I don't remember to take the trash out on Tuesdays. That's nothing to say in a job interview.
Yeah.
I tried it and it doesn't work. So I can vouch for that.
You don't want to tell me you have a terrible memory.
It's a problem with larceny, but I'm working through it. I'm taking something for it. I read that on Facebook, Teddy. That's a good joke. Anyway.
You're going to absolutely hate me, but I want this job. So not everybody was behind you. I mean, yeah. I'm putting this in context of people who are in career transition. They left the corporate job and they're trying to find something else to do. Not everyone's going to believe that they can be successful there. And you had that, your wife was not 100% behind you. I remember that, people saying, are you crazy?
Well, not 90% of the people when you start in comedy are kids 18 to 35. Starting at 49 years old, you're old enough to be mathematically a grandfather.
Yeah.
And they don't take you seriously. It's an age barrier, and you have to be you have to stand out in some way or another. And I stood out as, I wanted to write a show where I was people my age laugh with me and kids laugh at me. I don't care as long as I have the room. Yeah. I'm with you. Have to stand out. If otherwise, if you walk like every other duck and look like every other duck, they're going to pick the first duck in the row. Right. Yeah. So, and what I do is, if you want to stand out and do something, and in comedy, you want to push the edge or push the buttons. You want to do that in a job interview, but not cross line. You don't want to have someone worrying about where's this guy going with this and all that. Yeah. And that's why I do corporate comedy, is that someone who books me knows that people are going to be laughing. And, sometimes in my comedy, I'll say, like, where's this going? And right away, I turn it around and it's funny and tasteful and all that. But I do suggestive stuff, but it's nothing Red Skelton didn't do in 1955. Which he watched some of those shows and he was like, I can't believe he said that. Yeah, I'm with you. I remember watching Red, which reminds me, I might be my weekend binge is go look at some Red Skelton videos. So, but here, let's take the conversation a little bit in a slightly different way. The pressures to always be on stage. I mean, you're a stand-up comic, dude. You should be whipping out one-liners like this all day long on demand. Now, job seekers, they have the same challenge, a little bit different perspective, but they are always on stage. I tell people this: you are always being interviewed. Yes.
You're always on stage. How do you manage staying always being on stage?
Now I have a thing. I have a switch. I turn it on stage. I kind of turn it off. But in this conversation, I'll make a point and then make a little quip about it and be humorous about it, which is probably the best approach. I mean, you don't want to tell knock jokes in the job interview. But wait a minute,
I got to write that down, Sid.
But in my profession, after a show, there's a lot of us that, I mean, the whole idea that we have the interview here with a comedian, it's like the little league dad in the stands. Everybody wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, a little bit of them, and a lot of people want to be a comedian, and it's takes a lot of work, and then it gets to the point where you either have that or you don't, but it's not everybody can do it. But a lot of people, when they are leaving a show, want to tell me a joke. They want to make me laugh.
Sure.
Challenged by that. And some comedians hate that. But it's an opportunity to connect, because that person paid to come into that show. That person saw you and they like you well enough that they'll tell you a joke you've heard 100 times, but you need to act like this is the first time you heard it and it's funny.
Yeah.
Because that's that person's moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like in any conversation. And if I say, I've heard that before, well, that person's deflated.
Yeah.
And then we'll turn it back into where it's the job interviews. I used to interview, and I was very well at interviewing because I was sincere. It's like, what can I do for you? This is, you matter. What you are and what you do matters here. And I like to be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, we had a question from one of our viewers. Don asked, during an interview, should you avoid trying to be humorous? After all, sometimes what you think may backfire if the interviewer has a negative association with the subject. Again, you never know your audience 100%, but your thoughts on humor in the interview.
Yeah. The general rules are avoid, and I'm sure you've gone over this, politics, religion,
mother-in-law jokes.
Sex. Mother-in-law jokes. You can roll your eyes at it and then let them take it from there. But you stay away from those three topics for sure. And again, like a lot of good comedy is vulnerability. And if they're going to be vulnerable jokes, it's like, I made that mistake before. It's got to be, I've learned from that. Yeah. And if you're talking about a mistake that you made, saying, oh, when I was young, you put it in a tense of, when I was young, I made those mistakes, and I know a lot better now. That's the experience I have of.
You don't use words like, I hope I don't make that mistake again.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Many years ago, and I got started in the private outplacement business, which is essentially what we do at Goodwill, is help professionals in a variety of ways. And part of that's interview prep. And one of the big questions always is, what are your weaknesses? And it's been around for decades. And one of the, I was joking with one of our clients, this was back in the 90s. And he was just at a total loss. So to get this guy to laugh a little bit and so to break that ice, I said, why don't you try this answer? He says, what's that? And he goes, what are my weaknesses? Why don't you ask my wife? And the guy laughed. And the whole thought of using humor to kind of diffuse the tenseness, and because he was so wound up about, I got to get this right. I got to get this right. I got to get it right. And I said, basically, just chill for a little bit. Here, have a laugh. And now let's roll up our sleeves. We'll figure out a way to get through it. But I think had I not used that humor and treated it as, hey, I'm the professional here, and here's what you need to do, the guy tunes me out. Teddy does it all the time.
My answer to that was always, what are your weaknesses? I go, well, job interviews for one. And
yeah,
and it's kind of like saying, if you're at all impressed with me on this, I don't think I'm dying here, but I'm not. Job interviews aren't a comfortable situation, and you got to make it look as comfortable as possible, and that you own the room. And you say, like, job interviews, or like, how am I doing? Because a lot of times I got a response that's like, well, you could have fooled me.
Well,
Yeah.
and two, when it comes to interviewing, if they ask you, what is a weakness of yours? And you're an introvert, you're very nervous, they can see that and sense that. And so tell them what you are or what you aren't, and then tell them what you are. And so you could say, well, if you're looking for somebody who's going to be your PR guy and get out there in front of a camera, in front of a microphone, I'm not your guy. But if you want somebody who's analytical, who can crunch spreadsheet numbers day in and day out, that's why I'm here. So tell them what you aren't, because they can see it, and then tell them what you are. But all along the way, there's a thread of humor that goes through that. And I can't stress that enough with my clients. And I'm sure, Teddy, you're the same way. You know what? People hire people that they know, like, and trust. And as you build rapport, they begin to like you more and trust you more. And so humor plays a role in that. And I think a lot of times we dismiss that because we want to say the right thing and sound professional all the time. And there's a degree of humor, I think, that plays pretty well. And I appreciate you sharing some of that, Sid. I know we're getting close to the bottom of the hour, Teddy.
Yeah. So I'm going to just finish up that point about the pressures of always being on stage. I mean, I remind myself, for the most part, Sid, I mean, I go to a comedy club. I'm not expecting to be interviewed for, Teddy Burriss, the social media strategist. I'm not expecting that. But my wife and I are getting ready to go on a trip, and she's scared to death I'm going to run into somebody who wants to talk about my business. And we're going on a family trip. She wants me not to talk business. But I believe that if we are in our element, in our environment, in our communities, specifically if we're looking for business or we're looking for a job, we should always be ready for that interview conversation, or at least a conversation that may take us to an interview. You don't need to look for them, but you need to be ready for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And generally, I always found, if you're comfortable talking about things, if you're talking about positive things, if you are, talking behind somebody's back, if you're positive, is excellent. I could tell people, like, I did a thing with Teddy Burriss, and the nicest guy in the world. You should watch his thing. And, you can fill a whole. Randy, not so much, but.
Oh, shoot. I was going to record that and use it, Sid, and you just blew it.
Trying. Maybe it's this. Maybe this helps my image. Sid, is that going to help?
Break away to humor, where they know you're talking about positive, and then you got a little, nudging there, a little fun.
Yeah.
You don't want to be like, if you're so overconfident in an interview, like some comics are, and you don't want to be Don Rickles either, where you're like, everybody's insulted, and that's nowhere to go either.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a big fan of talking about my network to other people in a positive way. And a good buddy of mine who's been dead for many years, his name is Dale Carnegie. He told me to never criticize, condemn, or complain ever.
Yeah.
And it really is a huge thing. And so, whether you're a comedian, you can do that as a comedian, because it's in the right context. But if you're in job search, you better make sure your words are in the right context, so they can come back and bite you pretty bad. So,
yeah. And if you're whining in a job interview, what are you going to do when you're not on stage around the peers that you're working with? You're going to be 10 times as bad.
Yeah. I learned from that, Sid. So, hey, it's 12:30. It's July 7th. You're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Our special guest today is Sid Davis, live from Bermuda?
Bahamas,
excuse me, live from Bahamas today. He couldn't get a flight in on time, so he decided to do it virtually with us, and we're glad he joined us. Conversations about humor and during job search and the comedic industry. Is that the right way to say that? The comedy industry.
Comedy industry.
Yeah. Sid, let's talk about videotaping auditions. I mean, I bet you love doing these.
Oh, and we're not supposed to talk negative, but we'll dig into this. When you start out in comedy, you're at the lowest level. I call it minor league and then you want to climb the ladder. So you tape every show, and you learn from it and you watch it. And one of the things I thought we'll step aside here, when you watch yourself, is I had this on my own, and then I heard somebody else say it, and I'm like, I'm glad I'm thinking like that person. Is when I started, when I watched myself on stage, is turning the sound down and watching my body language. Did I look confident? You know, are my eyes, I have a tendency to shift my eyes and not make eye contact with the audience, you know, and those things. And if you watch a silent movie where those comics had to express what was going on just by visual, then you realize that, you know, when you sit in a job interview, it all comes back to that. What is your body language? What do you, you know, the words coming out are maybe 40% of the conversation, and the rest is, you know, if you had a stare off with your interviewer, you know, what's he gonna think of you? So I turned the sound down, and once I started making a connection with my body language and when to move and when not to move, things started happening a lot better for me. But you videotape yourself.
Interesting. Yeah.
Go ahead, Randy.
It's the same as radio. Again, my evil twin brother here, but I had a career in radio for a number of years until started having kids, and then it was time to get a real job, so to speak, and so that ended that career. But we had the same thing back then on reel-to-reels or cassettes, and that was how we sold ourselves. Here again, that was before the internet and such. Hey, we've had a couple of comments, and so let me work one in here. One of our viewers said it's a good sense of humor has been recognized as an important skill of a good leader. What are the characteristics of a good sense of humor?
Ronald Reagan, his jokes were, Barack Obama's, you know, his performance at a lot of places had a great sense of humor. A lot of the presidents anymore, you have to have a sense of humor. And some of the funniest things, watch John F. Kennedy, his press conferences in the 1960s, where I remember my mom and dad would sit there and watch that, and they were Republicans. They sat there and laughed at his press conferences because I forget the question. Some lady was talking about how your administration, it's on YouTube, your administration said you were going to help women out, and you said in your campaign, what has this administration done to help the women? And John F. Kennedy says, well, I'm sure we haven't done enough. And it just tore the room apart. Just that, and it was an honest answer. But yeah, a good sense of humor is, and it's, you come back and not be offensive.
Yeah.
And that's the key is, you know, you want to, in a job interview, you want to win over one person. What I do, I have to win over 20 to 10,000 people. You know, it's all different situation.
Well, look at us today, Sid. We're having a conversation, and collectively we're trying to win over 28,000 people just on Zoom, and that doesn't include everybody on LinkedIn and Facebook. So we got a daunting task in front of us, buddy.
We do.
Hey,
and we're recording it too, Sid. We're recording this thing so we can watch it.
I'm going to go back and look at my body language and go.
and we're also going live on about 7 different podcasts as well. So thanks for everybody who's been a part of this. The show keeps growing. We're now going live on 7 podcasts. Usually we show up by Friday. So hey, Sid, this videotaping our auditions is important, not only as a comedian, but also for job seekers. I mean, I think that, you know, so Kathy said that in there, should we be recording ourselves? Absolutely, Kathy. You should be recording yourself, and you should take a look at how you answered. You should have a list of interview questions, and you pretend like someone is asking. You can pretend if you want, Kathy, that Randy is your interviewer. Okay. So just get yourself a stuffed animal or a doll or something, and set this up in front of the camera. And this is the guy who's interviewing you. Okay. And then you pretend to ask you your question, and then you answer it as Kathy. And then you look at Kathy goes eek. Then you look at how you responded. That's just powerful. And you can all do that with your smartphone. You can do it with Zoom, whatever you can do, because practice makes you better. And if you want to become better as a comedian, if you want to become better as an interviewer to land that perfect job, you've got to practice this and videotaping your own auditions. So, Randy, got anything on the deck?
Not a whole lot, really. Just the whole thought about the practicing of interviews and the video and the power of the video. I think a lot of people, and I run into this with my clients. I wish more of my clients would be ready, willing, and able and open to doing interview prep. But I think unfortunately it puts people on the spot because now they're being judged. And that could be a fear of failure. And that's something we hadn't really talked about, but getting up on stage takes some cojones to get up and do that and to risk rejection. Because it's easier to just sit at home and pound out applications on the internet and wait for the phone to ring. And, I'll wing it in the interview because after all, everybody likes Randy and I'll do great. And so to heck with the practice part, I'll just be me and I'll win them over. And, it's not that easy. And it's a waste of time too, to do that. It's all about people. And the more you can have those interactions, I think, with folks and build that rapport, it can only help you when it comes to the actual interview. And
by the way, I was joking with Sid when he was talking about it's the way you present yourself. And I just put my arm in my head and yawn. And I'll tell you, I've met this person who it seems like every time I talk with them, they're across the globe in another country. Every time I talk with this person via Zoom, this person is always tired. And literally, you could see them leaning down and relaxing, and they yawn all the time. Now, I'm not trying to call out that person. I'm trying to call out that style of conversation. Imagine if you're talking to somebody who may want to introduce you to someone for a job opportunity. They're going to have to tell that guy, well, I know this dude named Teddy. I don't know. He's got the energy. He always seems like he's tired. Yeah. You're always on stage.
And, I have to address that with my voice. My literal voice is, I'll put it in an analogy. My voice is a Maserati that I have to drive 55 because I learned at a young age that I'm too loud if I just talk in a normal voice and let it go. Very rarely do I do that. I taught myself to talk in a little falsetto because I've had a couple occasions where one was a theater that was 1,200 people and wireless mics, which are the devil, went out and there's a bunch of that. And I'm not going to do that. Everybody's got to hear every word I say to make the jokes make sense. So I just put it down. And a lot of times if you run into a situation where vulnerability hits you and you are dealing with it, the people are on your side. If you run into, and so I said, we're going to do this Southern Baptist preacher style. And I yelled the whole show out and I had everybody's attention, probably more than I had if the mic were working, because they knew I was working through an adversity that wasn't my fault. And it was some of the best shows I've had, but talking about overcoming your voice and the auditions and all that, that's a situation. And I want to go back to a point you made about being honest in my job interviewing situations. It's okay to say, if people get stumped and the job interview goes south because they're asked a question and they're stumped, it's not against the law and it doesn't hurt anybody to say, I don't know. I'd like to know more about that. But that's honesty. Yeah. Rather than just making something up to try to say what they want to say. And an audience in a comedy club will sense that too, as if you're pandering them. And if a job interviewer sees that you're pandering, it's not a good way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Randy.
just out of curiosity, you got me thinking a little bit. I've got a couple of friends. One I used to work in radio with, who is a stand-up comedian, and then another guy, a buddy of his that I met through Facebook. They're both stand-up guys. And I'm just curious, who are some of your favorites today? People that we might see on television or whatnot. Some of your favorite comedians.
David Brenner was Bill Burr. And there's ones out there, a lot of people ask me that. I said, I'll use the comparison to televangelists, or preachers. The ones you see on TV, do their thing, but some of the best people that preach are those Southern Baptist churches, these little corner churches where they're just tearing it apart. So there's guys, there's like William Lee Martin, he's slowly becoming a household name, but he's funny. And Julie Scoggins is a comic, and a lot of these comics like me that we go out on, and Sid Davis is funny too, but a lot of these comics go out on cruise ships, and they're not household names, but you'll leave the show just your gut hurts from laughing. It's kind of like show business too. It's like not everybody you see on TV or in the movie is the best actor out there. It's just how things happen for them. So some of my, Julie Scoggins is funny. There's a girl that works with me now named Gally Croup, who's since one-liners. So, I have a lot of favorites, but David Brenner, as far as famous comics, I liked him. So prolific and so funny.
Interesting that different styles, and some people like the cuss words and that, and others the one-liners, and other ones. One thing I watched some of your stuff, and I really liked, because again, we're in the same general age range. We both have had kids, and I'll make a comparison. Bill Engvall as an example. The whole thing with the dumb husband or the goofy family and the day in the life, because we can relate to that. So many of us can. And I like your point you said earlier about people your age will laugh with you, and those young kids will laugh at the old man who doesn't have a clue. Right. And that's kind of your shtick, really. And that was, at least from what I saw in the videos. And I really like that, because I can relate to it. And it was clean humor, something that I could have a date, or I could have my mom watch it with me, that kind of a thing, and not feel embarrassed. And I wish there were more comedians that could pull that off as well as you do.
Yeah. And you touched on a point with me about a breakthrough for me when I was in comedy about appearing confident is you may be familiar with a comic named James Gregory, one of my favorites. He's not a household name, but he is kind of in the South. But I was a struggling comic, I was making my way, and I always had a problem with confidence on stage, connecting and all that. And I was a middle act then. And I was in a rental car that had Sirius XM radio. And I was trying to find the comedy stations on a radio that wasn't mine. And I went through 2 turns of the dial were religious stations, guys preaching. And then I stopped on one, I started driving, and then I got back. And then I got onto James Gregory and then Chris Rock. And I said, those guys use the same cadence as those ministers. They are not asking your permission. They're not saying, like, a question, do you think men should put the toilet seat down? No, it's like, men should always leave the toilet seat down. It's not they're not asking you to believe it. This is fact. And that's how you present what you're saying, asking permission to have the thought that you have. And I started adapting that attitude and getting more into a cadence, because a lot of things James Gregory talks about is he's Southern. People don't put real butter on biscuits. That spray mist, it's butter. it's butter, which, butter's not the best for you, but by the time he's done with you, you want to put a butter on a biscuit, and that's where it kicks through. And that all comes back into confidence, is that when you believe in what you're saying, your tone of voice and your presentation about what you're saying is what I'm telling you is a fact.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't beat around the bush with it.
So look at that confidence thing. So you're on stage, whether that's on stage or in an interview, you got hecklers or you got naysayers. So how do you deal? I think confidence is a big part of how do you deal with hecklers? You're not allowed to throw stuff at them, right, Sid?
No. I don't know if I have a unique way of dealing with hecklers, but I have my way, in that, first of all, heckling has got to be put into a perspective, is in my mind. If someone is yelling something back during my show, I never want to get my show off the rails. I want to keep going. So I dovetail what they say or what they shout out. First of all, if they're shouting out, they're listening to me and they're commenting.
They're not asleep. They're not sleeping. Yeah. So that's a good thing too.
So they're either agreeing or disagreeing with what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'll take that, and if they're disagreeing, I say, oh, no. And I go right on with what I was going to say next, or you got that right, and here's why. And I go on to my point. And my goal is, and I think I've accomplished this, my show is, you're more interested in what I have to say next instead of what you can add to the show. I create an atmosphere of like, I don't want to stop this guy. I want him to keep going. And that's worse than hecklers, actually, are people that come to a comedy club and then you start maybe talking about a dog, and the two ladies at the table go, oh, we just got a dog, and they'll start chit-chatting. That's the enemy. That's the devil right there. Is conversation at the tables. Because if you get a group of like 6 or 7 people at a comedy club, the numbers are going to say that 2, 3 of those people may have just come along because the group was going and have no interest in the show whatsoever. And sometimes I'll say to somebody like, I hate doing this. I say, if you're going to talk, there's a show going on up here. And sometimes they'll have the nerve to say, well, say something funny. I'm like, how, when you haven't even, the punchline's not funny if you don't listen to what led up to it. All right, I'm getting blood pressure here talking.
I wonder too, in some of the videos, not just yours and other ones I see, I don't know if it's a plant or you've got people in the audience who laughter is contagious. And once you get that one it's just like yawning. Teddy yawned, fake yawned, and then of course I fake yawned. But is it common in comedy to have that plant or two that just kind of gets the crowd laughing along with them? Is that a common thing?
A lot of people do it on the internet to make a thing of like a comic Barry's heckler. And a lot of times that's planted. And then again, I go back to it, like, I don't get heckled that often.
No, I mean a plant. I'm talking about in the audience, somebody, they just start laughing. And what that does is it helps encourage other people to laugh along with them, to kind of get the crowd animated versus just kind of sitting there going, okay. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what Ed McMahon did with Johnny Carson for years.
Exactly. Yeah. Is that a common thing that a lot of comedians employ to help get the crowd
I don't know if they're planted, but it's always nice to have that cackler in there that laughs at everything, because it's like making a noise in a chicken coop. The rest of the chickens start cackling too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So Randy, can we have a plant at the interview? And actually, the truth is you can have a plant in an interview. If you do your networking up front and you get to know the interviewers before you do the interview, then you've got a plant in the interview.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's as simple as knowing if they're a baseball fan or a common interest.
Yeah.
And it's just like Randy mentioned, Crosley Field. I said, oh, you remember Crosley Field? Remember that guy used to sell peanuts outside? And
yep.
There's a connection there. It can only go good from there.
Yeah, yeah, cool stuff. So yeah, for whether you're a comedian and a heckler or you're a job seeker and you got naysayers, you got people who are, bored with the conversation, it's your job to own that conversation. And most people in interviews don't think that way. They think they're in an interview only to answer the question. I believe you're in the interview to own that conversation. So much more rewarding that way. All right, Sid, a few minutes before we wrap up here. Tell us the audience a little bit, because, we got 26,000 people still on the show. We didn't lose anybody at all. So just quickly, some ideas about if I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to sell my business for $6 million. I'm going to go to my wife, I'm going to hand her my laptop and say, I'm going on the road as a comedian. What kind of job could I get? Not me personally, Sid. I mean, I know I'm better than most people as far as comedy, but in general.
You mean it's in the comedy industry, it's starting at the bottom and proving yourself with open mics. And I make a lot of sports comparisons to like golf. I don't know, is you can go on a driving range and hit balls and balls and balls until you have it perfected, and you can't recreate the nervousness of an actual tournament or actual, like, here's the ball and here's the tee and this shot counts and there's no taking it back. And especially with people watching, I've known like Craig Shoemaker. I know a lot of comics I play golf with that can get up and make it 2,500 people roar, get a standing ovation, and they stand over a golf ball at a pro-am and they're nuts. They can't handle that. That's that element. So it's like getting into comedy is like sports is, you practice and practice, and then you have to take it to the room. You can't recreate the nervousness you have in a real comedy show, in a job interview. It's just, the more you have job interviews, it's stage time. And, hopefully you won't make the mistakes on the dream job, but it's going to happen. And you got to learn from that. And you got to prepare yourself for worst case scenario. You kind of have to be negative on that end. That's where the airline mechanic comes in. It's like, I have to think about what can go wrong before the engine quits and I have to land in the Hudson, that kind of thing. But again, that's not making a joke. Those pilots were prepared for that scenario.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, in job search, you got to ask yourself, I heard you right. And just as an airline mechanic or a comedian, you got to ask yourself, what could possibly go wrong with my interview? What could possibly go wrong with this process? And how can I make it not happen? Dale Carnegie said, accept that the worst possible thing could happen.
Yes.
And be prepared for it.
And, when I'm talking to someone who's booked me for a corporate event, and sometimes you'll do a show and it'll be clean and they'll say, well, you could have been a lot more dirty. And I'm not talking filthy. They say you could have been a little more. So I'll go to a booker that's running the show and I'll go, well, here's the worst thing I say, and let's move backward from there. And I'll tell them I'll tell a joke and they'll go, oh, well, that's fine. I go, good, then we're off to the races here.
Yeah.
But that's the time to ask.
Right. Yeah.
Not after the show where you'll have that. And it's like being famous of any kind, politician or whatever. It doesn't matter how good you are. A lot of people are going to hate you because some people just don't like to follow the crowd. It's just
yeah. And that's why Randy and I are happy that 26,000 people showed up today.
We're hanging in there. Good.
Hey, I want to plant a seed here, Sid. Before we get off here today, Teddy and I are going to share an anecdotal story, or I'll make one up like I always do, or based on something you said. But before we let you go today, I want to hear maybe your favorite joke. It doesn't even have to be yours, but just to plant the seed. So if a clean joke that we can all relate to, we'll just sit tight on that for a moment. Teddy, okay. Are we ready to move into the last little segment here?
Yeah. Let's Sid, is there one point that you think is the most impactful from our conversation that people in job search could benefit from this conversation? One point, most impactful.
If you're you've got to come off as confident and sincere. And even if your sense of humor you can be self-deprecating and still have an array of confidence. It's like, I'm not a perfect person and I should be proud to admit that, but
Absolutely.
I'm confident about what I do, and I think you'll like it too. And as long as that oozes out of your pores.
I'm with you, buddy. I'm with you. Thank you very much. Sid, this is good stuff. I appreciate you showing up with us today. Randy, you got something?
Well, kind of, and this piggybacks with what Sid has been sharing today. And I also compare a lot of things to sports in the job search, sports and dating. Sports because it's competitive. When the pressure's on, you want to have practiced so that you've been in these scenarios as close as is possible. Now,
Are you talking about sports or dating?
Sports right now, Teddy. We're talking sports here. So I practiced the free throws. Now, granted, it's not game time situation and there's pressure, but at least from a strategy standpoint, when the defense lines up this way, this is watching game film. This is how we need to approach it. So I'm prepared. I practice the interview. I do all the things so that when the game is on, I can perform better. The other piece, and this is where humor comes in, and the dating piece is they got to like you. They have to, the culture fit needs to be there. They have to feel comfortable. And if they sit across the table from somebody who is stiff as a board, who is not comfortable in their own skin and does not present a positive, professional, personable image, it becomes a lot more difficult. Even if you're totally skilled and could do the job with your eyes closed, you still have to go through the interview. And so a little bit of humor can go a very long way in helping people bond and relate to you. Again, we talk about practice, but that's only half the battle. And it's the tone of voice, it's your body language, all the things you talked about. I love this stuff because we're talking the same language here. We really are.
And I want to enhance your point. And dating is a great example. Like
compatibility. Yeah.
You don't want to look like you're trying too hard. You can scare people away, acting I got to have this job. I love you. I would, on the second date, you're asking them to marry you, and you're overstepping the bounds of comfort. You got to be confident. I could work out for you. I could work for a lot of people. You don't want to get arrogant, but it's dating is, we're not talking so much that a restraining order's gotten, but you don't want to scare
stuff happens. Stuff happens.
By looking desperate.
We've all been there, Sid. We've all been
like you. They have to feel comfortable with you and feel like, hey, this is somebody I can work with or somebody I'd like to see again. Yeah. And so, humor goes a long way with that. Teddy, let me throw it to you and then we'll quickly talk about next week.
I'm with Sid, and dude, thanks a lot for showing up and taking time out of your busy travel schedule to hang with us. You know what? I wrote down the same two words that you used in the summary statement, Sid: confidence and self-deprecate. It's okay for you to self-deprecate appropriately. It's okay for you to self-deprecate in a conversation that is intended to be comedic in some way or another. It is never okay to self-deprecate yourself silently, privately, or because you're just not happy with you. There's a term, it's hang on, FML, F my life. I see that on social media a lot. Why would anybody want to tie those three words to your life? And I just don't think it's appropriate for you as a human to treat your human self in that way. Self-deprecating for the purposes of humor, I'm right there every day. But for any other reason, I think it's inappropriate for you to treat yourself that way, and it doesn't help you grow.
It's a fine line for sure. Got a good joke, Sid? And then I'll mention our guest for next week. What's your favorite?
One of my favorites is In My Act, and it's where I say it's two actually. There's being a father of a son, and there's no good news coming in the middle of the night of a phone call from your son that starts out, "Hey Dad, first off, thank God everybody's okay." And it's dark. It's the middle of the night. It's dark. I need to know what time it is. So I just rub my wife's leg, and she says, "Oh, please, it's 2:30 in the morning. Thank you."
I see that.
I saw that. I saw that one on one of your videos. I was laughing out loud with that thing, and your audience really, really dug that. Hey,
And
so
by the way,
thanks-
I tried that, Sid. It doesn't work.
Oh, well, you need to set the clock. They adjust the daylight savings time.
Randy,
good
Sid
deal.
again, buddy. Thank you very much for
Yeah.
joining us. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank
Hang
you.
tight. Who's our guest next
Yeah,
week, buddy?
we have two next week, and Teddy, you're going to be out of town, so Leslie Spees will fill in as our guest host along with me, co-host next week. And we'll have two guests. We're going to have Terry Cummings from Greater Winston-Salem and also Danielle Rose from Forsyth Tech. The topic is going to be learning and earning a win-win. We're going to talk about internships and the value of getting your foot in the door and learning, getting that info before you decide, hey, I'd like to be a mechanic, as an example, and all the skill that you had to acquire to do that. Wouldn't an internship be have maybe been a great way to get your feet wet to see A, if it's something you can do and would like to do, and B, they can get a sense for, hey, does this guy fit in and does he have the aptitude for it? So we're going to talk more about internships, how to get involved with that. If you're a company, how you can recruit interns, and also if you're a potential intern, how do you connect with companies? And that comes next week. That'll be on the 14th.
Yep.
My son's turned 34 that day.
Yeah.
Where did the years go? 34 years.
Slips right by, Randy. So I'm going to
They
take up and I'm going to talk to Sid later on off the show about being an intern with him. I'll carry your bags to the airport, man. So, hey, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Our special guest is Sid Davis. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you another day. Bye.
All right. Be good.